bringing them guns, bringing them money, helping them set up ways to launder money themselves. Like that was a Frankenstein that America made. And you can see that over and over again. Fast and Furious. So, whoa, we went to track these web, but you didn't track them. And you knew they were going.
Yeah.
They're not there to stop the flow of weapons. They're, like I said, it's weapons management. They're not there to stop the flow of drugs. They're there to manage the flow of drugs. Drugs in the Contra affair, drugs were coming out of Nicaragua to the United States, and pilots and weapons were coming in. Cocaine was coming into Miami, New Orleans, and Los Angeles primarily. And then weapons were coming out of Arkansas, mostly out of Mina, right into Nicaragua. The trade, that was the trade. And that, you know, people know the story of Barry Seal and the rest of it. That's what was going on. And they knew CIA was facilitated that whole thing.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Midweek Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on X, Rumble, YouTube, Facebook Live, BitChute, and also on the audio streams as well as alternate current radio later. And right now you can watch it at 21stcenturywire.com as well. Hello to everybody in the chat room at 21 Wire. We've got a special edition of Midweek Wire this week. Again, I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. There's been an interesting development, obviously much anticipated. The JFK files, the supposed drop. Don't know quite what to make of this. There's a lot of people saying a lot of different things, showing and pointing at different things. We're going to try to make a little bit of sense out of what's happening. And to do that, I've probably got one of the best people that we can have to help basically separate the wheat from the chaff, to use a common metaphor there. I want to bring Ryan Dawson onto the program right now. Ryan is the founder and editor of the ANC report, the Anti-Neocon report. You can also find him at Rye Liberty on X. I got his handle down the bottom of the screen there. Ryan, first of all, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. So Ryan, this is what they're saying in the media. They're saying the New York Times, the paper of record, has said, new trove of Kennedy files offers few revelations so far. A tranche of documents tied in some way to the assassination of John F. Kennedy was released late Tuesday. No major new details were found immediately, but scholars said it would take time to sift through all of the files. In total, they're saying some 70,000 files, Ryan. So first of all, I want to get your reaction to this much anticipated. Everybody was saying it was coming. You've got your own sort of take on it, but I'll hand it over to you to tell us what we're looking at. What's just happened here?
Well, before they released anything, I said what you would be looking at. Not, first of all, the files are only the files that were given to the 1992 review board, which are not all the files. So you're looking at the files that were given to them that have already gone through a filter. And so you're only looking at the remainder. And prior to this dump, 99% of those files had already been released. And so you're looking at the final little cache of what was left of those. But those were never the files. Listen, you wouldn't have tens of thousands of classified documents decades after an event if Oswald just shot him by himself. There would be nothing to hide. But there's plenty to hide. And there really wasn't most people just bought that story until the Zapruder film was released. What a lot of people don't know is that film wasn't released until the 70s. That film wasn't released until they shot his brother, too. RFK was dead in 68. He never saw that film. When that film was shown, and it's pretty obvious. You see him shot and his brain go out the back of his head. Someone shot him from the front. That is when Congress creates the House Select Committee on Assassination, and they studied it. And based on acoustic evidence, because of a police motorcade bike had the audio button pressed in near the grassy knoll, they determined multiple shooters. That is the official government conclusion, that there were multiple shooters in the Kennedy assassination. And of every conspiracy that's ever come across anyone's desk, even people who normally reject conspiracy categorically, they go, well, not that one, because it's on film. This is pretty obvious. And then you look at the history of Jack Ruby and some of the characters involved, and it gets really suspicious really fast. But I said, you're not going to get anything out of these files. It's already been whitewashed. They're just teasing you and teasing you. This puzzle was solvable without the files, without these files. The problem is, it's some weird authoritarian mindset where they're waiting for the government to tell on itself. You get all these people like, oh, here's where it's going to be. This is how we're finally going to know. They did the same thing with Epstein. They did the same thing with September 11th, which is weird because forever in the joint inquiry Senate investigation into the attacks of September 11th, or JS report, there were these consecutive 28 pages that were all redacted in a row. And I helped get those unredacted. And in the unredacted papers, it says that Saudi Arabian government payrolled employees, Osama Basnan and Omar Bayoumi, acted as intermediaries to finance 9/11 hijackers. Right there, you have state support for terrorism. Didn't matter. Right there in black and white, our own Senate investigation, our own government conclusion, it didn't matter because nobody went on Fox or CNN or whatever and explained the significance of that. And so you still have people looking at nanothermite or whatever. Look, it's already admitted. What more do you want? And I don't know. It's the same thing with Epstein. You have plenty of files and out of the mouth of babes, almost literally. I mean, these girls saying who raped them and giving you names, and there's your list. Doesn't matter because the guy on Fox or CNN didn't say it. Until that authoritarian source tells them what to be outraged about and tells them what to think, they don't know what to think. And you and I can tell them, it's right here. It's right here. Look, here's what it says. Here, it just doesn't register. And I don't know why it would really matter. I mean, if we sat here the next 10 hours or so and I went through the Kennedy assassinations and walked through the whole thing, Daley Plaza and the Ambassador Hotel, and you find out, okay, the Israelis outsourcing through expendables in the mob murdered the Kennedys. So, I mean, they're committing a genocide in front of the world right now. What's worse than that? Like, what more do you need to condemn Israeli atrocities and actions? They murdered 423 Palestinians in a matter of hours 2 nights ago. And what happens is these files get released, and most of these files on basically, there are a lot of files that got released, and it's worth going through them. You never know what you can combine with other things, and nobody did that. They were reacting minutes after they hit the floor. Like, there's no way you read these. There's no way you read all these that fast. But there's this obsession with being first. Like, after you read them, you like to think about them. I'm still reading them. It's mostly stuff I've already seen, which is what I anticipated. But I'm like, wow, you guys. And then here's what the second thing that happens is older files that have been out for a long time get posted on X as if it's a new file. So you've got this report that was, it's a weird thing because what they'll do is they'll take that's one of them. They'll take a copy of something and it's like the latest copy and they'll say, this is a new file because it's the best version of the same thing or whatever. Yeah, there's one on the Israelis. Like, yes, they limited it because this is what happened. James Jesus Angleton and Ted Shackley, they work in counterintelligence of the CIA, had a cabal with intentional plausible deniability, as Ali Noor says later in the Iran-Contra affair, working with the Israelis on assassinations. They tried to kill de Gaulle multiple times. They end up killing Kennedy. They had plots to kill Castro. This is what they were doing. And, all the stuff of like, well, it's Cuba, it's Russia, but like they don't gain anything at all by Lyndon Johnson becoming president. It's not like LBJ is soft on communism or anything like that. The only country that benefits from Lyndon Johnson becoming president is Israel. And the only policies that had a 180 change after Kennedy was killed were all the Mideast policies on Israel. Kennedy, both Kennedys, because his brother is in the Justice Department, they were registering the American Zionist Council, which is now AIPAC, as a foreign agent. They were inspecting Dimona for its illegally made nuclear weapons. And they still aren't a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And everybody knows they have hundreds of nukes because Mordecai Vanunu took pictures of the warheads and blew the whistle. And the person that turned him in and got him thrown in jail was Robert Maxwell, who's the father of convicted pedophile and human trafficker Glenn Maxwell. And that's how, they brought them in. So that's the old story. But Israel made nukes, and they got the highly enriched uranium from the United States. They stole it out of Apollo, Pennsylvania. And then the Kennedys were onto them. And we know from John Hayden and other people that work, I'm not going to drop a bunch of names, we'll keep this simple. People working for RFK discovered flora and fauna outside Dimona with 97% enriched uranium. The only country where that existed at that level was the United States. It was out of the Nautilus program for nuclear submarines. And people who had worked on making that, like Zalman Shapiro, had access to it, and they were stealing it. And I made a whole long documentary about it, and it's in books like Grant F. Smith, Roger Motson, lots of people have covered this. Here's what's odd. A lot of information we used in those books and films wasn't released till around 2015. They sat on it. Now, there were other ways to get at it, but it was finally released. This is another thing like, okay, look, right here, it's showing you Kennedy knew they had nukes. And he knew that Ben Gurion was lying to him. You can quote him saying, all the Israelis ever effing do is effing lie to me. He knew he was getting jerked around. And they thought he was an existential threat. Ben Gurion resigned to create a moratorium. He resigned. And a month later, somebody shot JFK. And that was the end of anybody looking into their nuclear program. LBJ gets in. LBJ, who was sleeping with an Irgun operative, Matilda Krim, he gets in and gives us the USS Liberty. And he says, I want that GD boat sank to the bottom of the ocean. And after the Israelis did that, as false flag, they clearly attacked an American intelligence ship that had intelligence on the mass graves in Egypt and what Israel was doing. They put a gag order on the survivors. Instead of punishing Israel, they punished the men that were able to survive that onslaught. And one of the fighter pilots who had guilt got in trouble is Israel too. And they did all minor war crimes. It's not shocking now. Oh, wow. Israel shot the life rafts. Like, it's Israel. They blow up apartments with people in them. They act the way they do because there's no consequence. I honestly think they could murder all 2 million people in Gaza and they would just say it's God's way or whatever. Like, what number would it take? You look at that place and it looks like rubble. It just nothing. They have flattened whole sections of Khan Yunis in Gaza City. There's some remnants of buildings where there's not a single intact house. There's not a single one. There's not a Hamas tunnel under every home either. No. And it's not just homes, it's commercial buildings. They don't have a store, a hospital, an apartment. There is nothing. They have demolished everything. And they did it while the people were there. And when the people ran away, they went and shot the tents and set them on fire. This is what you're dealing with. And why are they so ruthless? Well, because if you can get away with killing the president, you can get away with that genocide. You can get away with anything. And they are.
Here's something you posted, Ryan, on your account. I think earlier yesterday. You said, do you really think it will matter for the world to learn that Israel killed JFK? They just murdered 423 people last night without consequence. JFK was killed because he stood up to Israeli power. If you allow a state to get away with genocide, you will let them do anything. So, I mean, that's kind of putting things in perspective.
I stand by that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're making a point here to kind of zoom out and let's look at the big picture of what this really means. And so is this the meaning?
The Israelis were so delighted about James Angleton, they named a forest after him. How many times in U.S. history, British history, or whatever, do you name a piece of land after a foreign intelligence officer? Why? That's why Rothschild's written on the money. And the main street, if you go to Tel Aviv or any of their cities, it's not Main Street. It's Rothschild Ave, Rothschild Road, Rothschild whatever. It's from their founders. And Angleton, he's American. What are you doing? What is that for? What did he do for you?
Well, that leads us to...
I want to add this too. They had 2 memorial services. And the head of Shin Bet and the head of Mossad and the former heads of Mossad, they're all there at a service for Angleton. Why are all the heads of Israeli intelligence at a funeral memorial for an American in the CIA and counterintelligence, honoring him and naming dirt after him? So they all came to give their respects because they knew what he did for them. They killed JFK, and then the Americans essentially allowed Israel to have the bomb.
Here's another one of those documents which you shared up on your feed, Ryan. Here, tell us. This is an interesting one. Someone said vindicated because of this. It says the highlighted at the bottom, Ryan. It says we now have plenty of money. Our new backers are Jews. As soon as quote we or they take care of Kennedy. So yeah. This is in an actual document here.
That's in reference to the Chicago mob. That's what he means by we. And Kennedy canceled his trip to Chicago. That's something not in that document. It's something you'd have to know. This is why you need context. But they had wind of some, and the FBI went around and expunged all the documents related to why he canceled his trip to Chicago and what he was doing and how come you weren't going there. Yeah, and what that was is Kennedy had definitely, especially Robert, pissed off organized crime. His dad was in organized crime. Joe Kennedy got saved by the outfit because the Philly mob was going to kill him for debts. And, but the sons never made that deal. They said Robert Kennedy went after him. He had sent Carlos Marcello to Guatemala. He had jailed a lot of them. Hoffa was in jail. Eventually, he got a lot of these mobsters, and he was putting pressure on them. He embarrassed Sam Giancana, saying, I thought only little girls giggled and stuff. They didn't like that. And they had contract killing, like take this guy out. And they found, when he's saying they, he's meaning, when he says the Jews, he means the Israelis. They talk like that. These are thugs. So obviously it's not like all the Jews, but they would refer to themselves as the Italians, the Jews, whatever, because they were ethnic gangs. The mob was very ethnocentric. You have an Irish gang, an Italian gang, Some of that was because of the way from language and immigration and stuff, and some of it was because they had state sponsorship. The Italian mafia had government backing out of Sicily. That's why they kind of got ahead of all the other mobs, is because they had state sponsorship. And that has to do with during World War II, a lot of these mob outfits who were a power rival to Mussolini were sponsored by the United States. So they gained all this power. Mussolini was taken out, but then nobody then removed what you created there, where the mob had taken over and become governors, mayors. They had whole towns. And so they were able to sponsor their organized crime in the United States and Canada because of that. long story. Doug Valentine is the guy that has written the most about that. Get any Doug Valentine book on the history of the mob or the history of the Bureau of Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and you'll see too that a lot of the agencies set up to police these things, just like today with the CIA moving around cocaine and whatnot, get involved in it, and instead of eliminating it, they manage it. And the Soviets did the same thing. But the most important type of crime wasn't the narcotics business. It wasn't the any other white collar crime. It was gun running. And during the Cold War, you have different factions that would kind of look the other way if the gun running was to a certain nation in your favor, that it would be favorable to somebody you didn't want to go to the Soviet orbit. They didn't want it to go to the US orbit. And so they would kind of, I don't see any weapons from Bulgaria going to Syria, whatever. Oh, wait, that's more recent. Sorry. But you know what I'm saying? They would do that. And so they became weapons management, drug management, fill in the blank management rather than solving it. So if the source of weapons were helping finance KTM in China, for example, and they knew the mob was making bank on it, but their supplier was somebody who was fighting communism, and this happened a lot in Latin America too, then they would just let it go. And the mob quickly realized, if we partner with this, they leave us alone. And so you would see that Pablo Escobar knew that too. And then this happens in Cuba. Some of the weapons that were supposed to be there for the supposed ground forces in the Bay of Pigs had been diverted to Israel. And they say the opposite. They say there was no air support. There was air support. There wasn't the ground support they had promised wasn't there because they didn't have the guns they're supposed to have. But they can't say what happened to them because then they'd be telling on the largest gun running network in history. And it culminated with them stealing the bomb. It's unbelievable. Like, you can steal nuclear weapons? Absolutely. Now, the French had set them up with a plutonium reactor, and it wasn't just, but the highly enriched uranium, all of it came from the United States, and they were building nukes. And that started and they almost sold nuclear weapons to South Africa. The only reason they didn't was because they couldn't agree on a price, but there was nothing there to stop it.
I've got a video clip I want to share with you. It's from Martin Sandler, who's an author of a book. You probably have seen this. It was broadcast on C-SPAN many years ago. But it's just getting into this this idea of the Israeli nuclear question. And so there's so much noise and so much static around the JFK story. There's so much conspiracy lore. But like the first thing I go to, because there's two different things, Ryan, and maybe you can explain this. There's who did it, and then there's why it was done or what was the motive. Those are two different things. People tend to focus a lot on the first one, which is, who pulled the trigger. But equally important, I think, Ryan, is why was it done? What was the motivation? And
I wouldn't put them equal. Why is far more important. For example, if that skinny little bastard, I don't even remember his name, that almost shot President Trump in Pennsylvania, some scraggly-haired nobody.
Yeah,
I don't want to say his name. I honestly, if I remembered his name, I wouldn't say it because I think that adds to the appeal of becoming a mass shooter or whatever. But some nobody dork, that worked at an elderly care facility in Pennsylvania, all by himself, got on a roof that somehow the Secret Service, had a Pac-Man shaped perimeter, and they allowed a rooftop overlooking where the president was going to be standing. And he's too arrogant. He had to take a headshot. If he had aimed at center mass, Trump would have been taken out. But the thing is, let's say that, Kim Cheadle and Christopher Wray, they were involved in that. That would be a far bigger deal than the little expendable nobody that pulled the trigger. When you shoot someone, you don't have a CIA agent do it. You find some derp or some thug. Like, I called it modern privateering, because when the Brits used to harass Spanish and French ships, they would use pirates secretly on the payroll of the crown, and that's called a privateer. And that's the way they outsource to the mafia or cartels, Al Qaeda, ISIS, whatever the thug of the area is. in America in the 60s, it was organized crime, who already have hitmen. And we're like, all right, we'll put you in place. We'll create what's called a kill zone. We're going to drive them in there. You take them out. The people doing the shooting are, you've ever heard the analogy like it's an octopus where you see like an octopus that controls everything? I should have given you this map. If you look at a classic simple map of organized crime where you have the boss and counselor, the underboss, and then under the underboss, it splits into, let's say, 3 or 4 lines where you have the capos and then everybody under them. You notice everybody under them, if you were to draw around this map, it looks like an octopus. The head is the boss and underboss and consigliere and and the legs are all the capos. Every person working for a capo and one leg has no idea what the other leg is doing. That's called compartmentalization. And so when you get to the bottom of a leg, it's just an idiot with a gun. I mean, they're just go shoot that person. Here's $100,000. Someone else has to put out the contract for contract killing and acquire the funds and everything that they're going to need and to cover it up or to cut them loose or what have you. But the guy at the bottom is practically useless. Like when Gene Caesar shot RFK, it doesn't matter if you know who that is because he is nobody. He's a guy who's in trouble, been arrested in Tijuana, in and out of jail, worked for Ace Security, been reemployed for all of the day, got behind him, shot him, his witness shooting him. It's dead to rights. That's who did it. It's his connections to Alessio and those to Smith and Modelitz and all these other people that matters. And that's how it is with like the why is way more important than the who. The who is not that exciting. It's like, oh, look, a known thug shot someone. Yeah. What'd you think?
So here's Martin Sandler. We get your comment on this clip, and I'm sure you have plenty to say. And we'll also talk about one of your documentary films, Ryan, which has got quite a lot of attention in the recent years, Numec. We'll talk about that in a moment. But here's Martin Sandler.
There's a very surprising series of letters between Kennedy and David Ben-Gurion, not only the premier of Israel, but the founder of Israel, in which they're very angry letters, in which Kennedy is saying to Ben-Gurion, I'm killing myself trying to get a nuclear test ban treaty. I've even got de Gaulle on board, and that's impossible. And you keep testing in Dimona. You've got to stop. And Ben-Gurion, thank you, in so many words says, it's easy for you to say sitting in Hyannisport. I'm sitting with the Arabs all around me, and you want me to give up nuclear testing. And Kennedy threatens him. And he threatens him in such a way that Ben-Gurion resigns. And I will tell you that I found articles, not in any crackpot publications, but in very sophisticated publications saying, forget Lyndon Johnson, forget the CIA, forget Fidel Castro. The Mossad killed Kennedy because they were so upset over what he did to Ben-Gurion.
Well, that's it's pretty heavy implication there, Ryan.
They tried to kill de Gaulle too.
How much truth is there in what Martin Sandler's pointing to there?
He's 100% correct. I mean, Ben-Gurion was a terrorist that became the first prime minister of Israel. And the Haganah that becomes the IDF, and the Palmach, which becomes like their navy, and these organizations, Irgun, Stern, they just go right into the Jewish agency and aspects of the Israeli state. They just become the government. All these thugs that were illegally bringing arms into Palestine, who would throw grenades inside of houses, commit acts of terrorism, blowing up boats full of Jews, like the SS Patria, for example. It didn't matter to them. They did whatever they could do for power. And the UK backed them up. The UK is glorious for always backing the religious extremists because it's a recipe for disaster. These aren't like regular Jews who wanted somewhere safe to practice Judaism or something. That was the very, very early Zionism. This was immediately the manifest destiny exterminationist crowd. Menachem Begin was worse, and he becomes a prime minister too. Their first 6 prime ministers in a row were all part of these terrorist cliques. But little Ben Gurion, you ever notice how the mob bosses are all like 5'2" for some reason? It's just like, but little Ben Gurion was scared to death because he was jerking Kennedy around. He was building nuclear weapons, and they knew he was doing it. He wouldn't allow inspections, or he wouldn't allow them to inspect the whole facility. And they're like, look, we know you just signed this treaty. You've built this bomb. We're going to have to figure out a way to deal with this. He's like, no, Israel has to have nuclear weapons because they felt threatened by all their neighbors who they had all preemptively attacked. And people always skip the Suez Crisis. They go from 48 to 67. But in 1956, Operation Susanna, which now people call the Lavon Affair, I don't, because Pinhas Lavon was actually a fall guy. It's Ben Gavili that made that plot with Philip Nathanson. That's a can of worms. But they preemptively attacked all their neighbors in that war too. And that was another attempted false flag where they went around bombing Western targets in Egypt and tried to, blame it on Arab terrorists. Nathanson's bomb went off prematurely in his jacket. They raided his house. They found the papers. They knew it was an Israeli intelligence operation. It still started a war anyway, and the French and British assisted Israel in that war. But Eisenhower, to his credit, said, knock it off. And he puts an end to that, and he put in UN peacekeeping troops in the Sinai Peninsula to prevent annexation of that land. 2 weeks after they were moved. So this is 1957 by the time all that got set up. They're there for 10 years. They leave in May. And there's another war at the very beginning of June, the 6-Day War. Israel, as soon as the Eisenhower's men were gone, attack Egypt again in a preemptive war, and that's where you get the liberty and so on. On the anniversary of the 6-Day War is when they would kill Robert Kennedy in 68. But that was the plot the whole time. Eisenhower stood up to him too, and Kennedy was standing up to him. And like, dang, we've got Europe. We can't get the Americans on board. But from the time Kennedy died, when LBJ got in, they captured everything because they already had counterintelligence of the CIA under Angleton. Even when Colby went and cleaned house, they still had Ted Shackley as a mole. But eventually, it would get to the point where it's, the William Burns and the James Woolsey, who's an Epstein guy too, are the heads of the CIA. And once you got your guy as the top, they just hire each other. And so a lot of intelligence in the United States, Snowden admit this, the NSA shares everything with the Israelis. Jeff Gates wrote about it too. If you can take the bottleneck positions, then you take over the whole apparatus because they just hire their own men. And these are all appointed positions. And so it gets to the point where, Lyndon Johnson just starts appointing Israeli moles into everything. And that was their capture of the United States. It's been pro-Zionist ever since. They never lifted a finger. They never mentioned nukes again. They never mentioned registering AIPAC under FARA again. It never happened. The closest it got was, it's not registering as a foreign agent, but Patrick Leahy with the Leahy Amendment would have arranged so if you have nuclear weapons and you're not signed to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, then you can't get conventional weapons from the United States. That's the Leahy Amendment. And they tried to kill him with weapons-grade anthrax that said death to America, death to Israel on the notes. And they messed up really bad in that attack because they mailed out 2 letters on September 18th that had identical notes inside, death to America, death to Israel, take penicillin, One with real anthrax and one with fake anthrax. And the one with fake anthrax was sent to Judith Miller, who just blames everything on Iraq in her career. The 93 World Trade Center attack, she said it's Iraq. Oklahoma City, she said it's Iraq. Anything that happened, it's Iraq. Why would Al-Qaeda send fake anthrax to anyone, first off, but especially Judith Miller, but then real anthrax to the senators that are trying to limit weapons going to Israel. They didn't. But you can't claim it's a copycat attack because they're both mailed on the same day. They weren't opened on the same day because they had grounded all the planes and the mail got messed up. Blah, blah, blah. And that, okay, there's your story. Then they lied about it in Prague. They said, Iraqis gave anthrax to Muhammad Atta at a meeting in Prague, a meeting that never took place between two parties that didn't have anthrax. But they're like, yep, he made it in these mobile weapons labs. Here's proof, some cartoons. And Colin Powell went and pointed to the cartoons of the mobile weapons labs at the UN, and Miller and Troxler and all these normal, Zionists at the New York Times were essentially quoting a bank fraudster like Ahmad Chalabi and yellow journalism from neocons in the Office of Special Plans, and they ended up with a war in Iraq over nothing. But that whole thing started over anthrax, and it's people that they really did try to target and kill anthrax are the ones going against Israel, not the ones going for them.
Was Tom Daschle one of those?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, Patrick Leahy and Tom Daschle. And because he was on the Judicial Committee too, and he could make Leahy's thing work, the Leahy Amendment. And they wanted them out. And they were also the only two that were saying no to the Patriot Act. and they crammed that through. And most of that was written by Joe Lieberman, who is a staunch hardcore Zionist. That thing was pre-written. They did not write 300-page bill that day. They was sitting and they're like, if there happens to be some kind of event, here's our answer.
A new Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. So the new Pearl Harbor part is written in Project for a New American Century, which is a neoconservative think tank of the worst of the worst. Louis Leibowitz and Richard Pearl and Wolfowitz, all this, Elliot Abrams, people hung over from Iran-Contra fame, like Michael Ledeen and stuff. But it was Gary Schmidt and Fred Barnes and William Crystal who were writing about anthrax before any anthrax was mailed. And they kept saying, Osama Saddam. And you look back in 2001, Time magazine stuff would have a picture of Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein on the next page, trying to conflate the two things together. And Saddam Hussein, not saying he's a great person or anything, but had nothing to do with September 11th or Osama bin Laden. They hated Al-Qaeda. But that's what they went with. And the bridge that they could get was this BS about anthrax and weapons of mass destruction. And when he went to the UN with his little mock vial of anthrax, Colin Powell, Secretary of State, but his speech was written by Libby and Tenet, and Tenet was part of, I'm get into him in a second, but like the legal reason was, well, Iraq's in violation of UN Resolution 1441 stipulating they can't have WMDs. They lost the first Gulf War, which is also based on lies, babies on incubators and the rest of it. Tom Lantos running around waving his hands in the air, having a fit. Never happened. And they killed 100,000 people in that war. And they stipulated you can't have WMDs. Well, they didn't have WMDs. And the chief weapons inspector, as you and I both know, Scott Ritter, went over and said, we have gotten rid of all of their weapons. They went and blew them up. And when they had to go through and get serial numbers, they did not have WMDs. And that everyone knows that now. Everybody knows that now. Even Dick Cheney and George Bush admitted it. But they said it was mistaken intelligence. No, it wasn't. It was intentional deceptions. They wanted a war with Iraq because that's what Israel wanted. Israel imported 77% of its oil from Iraq, from the Kurdistan region of Iraq after the war. That's 3/4, a little more than 3/4 of all their oil imports came from Iraq. And who did the Kurds sell to out of Syria when they annexed Rojava and sat on the oil? Israel again. So when you say it's a war for oil, whose oil? Because the imports to the United States don't change. It was Israel's oil. And Saddam Hussein and the Ba'athist Party was a threat to Israel, and he supported Palestinians' rights, and they had to get rid of him. They got rid of all the secular leaders. And you end up with a script, Libya, Syria, and we're going down the strip, the whole list. And Yemen and Iran are next. They're bombing Yemen. Did you notice they hit 3 areas at once? They had HTS attack Lebanon, Israel bombs Gaza, and the U.S. bombed Yemen. The HTS attack fell flat on its face. which I was delighted to see. At the same time, Somalia gave a significant blow to al-Shabaab too. They got rid of about 120 al-Qaeda fighters. But the bombing on Gaza, I mean, they're helpless. They're just bombing families. They're not even hitting Hamas. They just blew up a bunch of people, hundreds of people. The bombing on the Houthis was not effective either. I was sure it was expensive. And I think that's the goal. Like the MIC needs to have something to drive budgets. It won't work, but everybody knows this is the path to Iran. They always say Iranian-backed Houthi, Iranian. Colonel Wilkerson is a really good guest to have on if you can get him. He'll explain, because he's part of it. Back when he was part of the administration back in 92 when the Houthis formed, they got a new leader in 94, and they're really not. I mean, they'll get weapons from Iran if Iran will give them to them, but they don't listen to Iran. They'll do what they've been doing.
Oh, they have their own missiles, engineering. They have advanced weaponry they can produce themselves. They've done it for years. So it's like, even if Iran cut off, they're blockaded, by the way, even right now. So it's not like easy to get things into Yemen. But even if they were completely isolated, they could do pretty much everything they've been doing without Iranian help at this point. And
they could, and the U.S. supplied them with weapons secretly on black markets. Like they have M60 machine guns and stuff. Those are American weapons that they got through black market. The U.S. creates problems, and it's like the old kill what you create situation. Same thing with Al Qaeda. I mean, that originally they were being financed through BCCI, and it was the CIA that were bringing them guns, bringing them money, helping them set up ways to launder money themselves. Like that was a Frankenstein that America made. And you can see that over and over again. Fast and Furious. We went to track these web, but you didn't track them. And you knew they were going.
Yeah.
They're not there to stop the flow of weapons. They're, like I said, it's weapons management. They're not there to stop the flow of drugs. They're there to manage the flow of drugs. Drugs in the Contra affair, drugs were coming out of Nicaragua to the United States, and pilots and weapons were coming in. Cocaine was coming into Miami, New Orleans, and Los Angeles primarily. And then weapons were coming out of Arkansas, mostly out of Mina, right into Nicaragua. That was the trade. And that, people know the story of Barry Seal and the rest of it. That's what was going on. And they knew CIA facilitated that whole thing. CIA did the same thing with Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. And you can rinse, repeat. Bosnia, same thing. Syria, very similar. They had third parties do it that time. So you had Turkey and the Gulf state, but it was ultimately, that's the plan. They couldn't get a hot war like they did in Iraq because the reaction to the Iraq war was the new Vietnam syndrome. People they didn't have any everything you said was a lie. So they used proxy forces, and that didn't work at first. And then, as sadly as we know, the stranglehold on the economy did work. People were unwilling to fight for Assad. It was like, it doesn't matter. Like, we have nothing. And so, yeah. Within 12 days, they took over.
Back to Israel and the nuclear question. And Ryan, you've done a great documentary film here. If you haven't seen it yet, it's called Numec. How Israel stole the bomb. And this is central to this JFK story. If you just kind of explain how these two pieces fit together, because it does seem to me, and this is a very well-produced documentary. It's on Rumble right now. It's had 300,000+ views already.
It's free.
It's excellent. It's an excellent, well-produced film, Ryan. And I think it's probably your best. One of your best, if not your best.
It's the best production value one I've done. So people realize some of my earlier films are just me on Windows Movie Maker out of pure hate, making the thing the best I could do. This one I hired, was older and had more ability, so I hired people to help me with it. That's why it looks the way it does. I've always had good content, but I'm not like a movie person with the visuals. So we got a team together. We got this one, and a lot of the nuclear weapons theft in this documentary leans heavily on the books from people like Grant F. Smith. I mean, they did a lot of the legwork that's in this film, but this film ties it together with Kennedy and with Epstein, because that whole Epstein ring is just like 2.0 from the Sonborn Institute, which is essential. You like Abraham Feynman, these people that were doing the conventional weapons smuggling to Israel. And if they had been popped on that, they never would have stolen uranium. But what they were doing is they were laundering money through Holocaust charities. How low, right? But to accuse a Holocaust charity right after the Holocaust of laundering money for illegal weapons smuggling was political suicide. So they just sort of let them do it. And so they got more and more brazen and emboldened by, we're untouchable, we're untouchable. And so the War Assets Administration was supposed to be decommissioning weapons, because you have to understand, right after World War II, all right, there's billions and billions of dollars in small arms and weapons all over Europe, the United States. Like, it's a world war. Japan, Vietnam, everybody had. The war's over. Now what? You have all these guns, and immediately there were massive black markets where people were like, commission, yeah, you wanted it. And so a lot of the arms end up in Latin America. They end up in what becomes the Balkans and all over the place, North Africa. Like, anybody that need these, there were a lot of buyers. And so quickly you had this Cold War between the Soviet sphere, and we'll just call it the American sphere, the Western sphere, whatever, of managing these black markets. And what the CIA and KGB were supposed to do is get rid of the weapons. And that's what they were saying to each other, but both of them, and it wasn't just one, it was both of them, did this game of allowing them into their allies' hands. And Israel was running guns to Palestine because they were hell-bent on taking it over. And so that was happening during the end of the war, and during the war too. There was a lot of black markets weapons. This is always going to happen when you have a major war. A lot of the weapons in Ukraine never made it to the front line. Who knows where they're going to pop up? But somebody's got a bunch of in-laws and javelins. It's going to be bad. And that's, they worked with a group in the United States that were a bunch of Jewish millionaires who got together. Ideologically, they wanted to help create the state of Israel. And Jewish organized crime was very much a part of this, in smuggling machine guns and ammo and anything, even airplanes they got with Charlie Winters, that they would bring for the brand new Israeli state. And it just gets to the point where they start stealing highly enriched uranium. They had a plant from the French, so they're going to build the bomb. And they did. And they got caught. And they got caught by the Kennedys. So somebody shot both of them. I wonder who. Maybe it was Iran. Maybe it was Russia. No. And by the way, Khrushchev and Kennedy had a back channel. So did Fidel and Kennedy. They were working things out. They had no reason to kill him, and no love for LBJ whatsoever.
I was going to ask you about that. Where was Khrushchev with Israel on that Israeli issue? Because that's a little bit of a clue, because there's so much talk about the Cubans and Castro and, the assassination attempt on Castro, the Cuban Missile Crisis. All of this, a lot of this is very complicated, spooks, espionage, counter-espionage, noise, geopolitics. But what about Israel and Soviet Union at the time? What do you know?
Well, Khrushchev, like Kennedy said, really was working on a nuclear weapons ban. And like he said, even the French were on board, which was very hard to do. And Kennedy was making it happen, especially after the Bay of Pigs. Like, okay, they moved their weapons out of Turkey. Russia moved their weapons out of Cuba. You need to cool down, because that was almost real bad. And Khrushchev was willing to work with Kennedy. They needed face-saving ways to do it. He was not all about this. But if you go to the real problem that Israel had, like the neighbor they're worried about was Egypt. Nasser was scared the hell out of them. And when he was already involved helping Yemen fight Saudi Arabia and had his hands full is when the Israelis attacked and start the 6-day war. Egypt was not trying to start a war on two fronts. They did not start that war. Israel preemptively attacked them and attacked them while their planes and things were on the ground. And they had a defense pact with Syria. Egypt and Syria used to be a country. They were one country briefly. And that was under his leadership. They didn't like him. They didn't like Sadat. So, but Nasser had went to Russia to help build an electric dam because they'd been rejected and he shouldn't have been. So he's like, okay, well, maybe the Soviets, not Russia, USSR, excuse me, the Soviet Union. It's Russia though. Yeah. And that was 50% of their electrical power. And that was scaring the Americans. And so, Eisenhower and all gets in. It's like, we don't want to lose Egypt, but it's the Israelis that they were sending letter bombs and constant terrorist attacks, and they're trying to take the Sinai Peninsula, Greater Israel. They were high on their own supply. They had 1 in 48, in large part because of Britain and France. That's the first Nakba. Over almost 800,000 people moved out of their native land, and the territory was just stolen. It creates the first Palestine, which just shrinks every year. They're still annexing pieces of the West Bank. But it starts with these terrorists, and they always had the British on board. They get the French on board. They did not have the Americans until they killed Kennedy. Khrushchev, too, though, he was very wary of, they were exchanging Jewish diaspora with Israel for favors. So Israel was giving the Soviets American trade secrets and technology in exchange for Jewish immigrants. So that is one thing that was going on. He was using them to gain access on what the Americans had. But there was no ideological, it's not like they hated the Palestinians or cared one way or the other. And they didn't care whether Jews left or stayed. They just if we can use them as a bargaining chip and exchange these for something. And that really hit the fan in the 90s, where that's when you have this massive wave of Jewish immigrants to Israel, because the entire economy of Russia collapses after the fall of the Soviet Union, and they leverage that. And that's when you get Jonathan Pollard, infamous spy that gave the Soviets America's first strike plans, did so much damage. They let him out of jail, got a private jet to meet Netanyahu and kiss the ground in Israel. Jeff Blankford's a good guy that can explain that whole story. But over and over again, the Israelis would play both sides in that conflict. So that, they're supposed to be working with the Americans, or secretly giving trade secrets to Russia. And then afterward, they did it with China. China's entire fighter jet program right now is modeled after the U.S. fighter jets, and they got all of it from the Israelis. Okay. And I have a film about that too. I have a film just on Chinese fighter jets coming from Israel. It's up on my website. It's free. And yeah, everyone in government is aware of this, but they don't do anything about it. So all this rhetoric about China and Taiwan and all that, China would not have any of this capability to check you if they didn't have everything you have, because the Israelis give it to them, sell it to them. They don't give it to them, but they're selling American trade secrets. And the Chinese made fighter jets just like the United States is.
So just for large sums of money, and also to what,
and to stay out of it and not prevent them from their regional ambitions, because China could,
if they wanted to,
AI in a day,
but
they won't go but so far, because China is very energy dependent on the Middle East, and they need a lot of oil and gas from Iran and Iraq. So they're not going to cut their nose off, but despite their face. But you saw them eventually. Look how quickly, when China came in and brokered a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, it was just like that. Now it's over.
Yeah.
I think the real leverage behind that, they had China come in and get the credit for that. But I honestly think the Houthis hitting the northern oil fields in Saudi Arabia, which they have no defense for, cruise missile could wipe them out. That scared them. And they said, maybe we should talk. So now America's doing it.
So on the JFK files, I want to get your take, Ryan, on the theater. There's
Oh my gosh.
a lot of hype. We'll bring Trump back up on.
They blame his wife. They blame the driver. They blame anything but the Israelis. The classic things are he was about to get out of Vietnam, so the MI6 killed him. Or he didn't give air support to the Bay of Pigs, so the CIA killed him because he fired Dulles after all. Or which is not a dumb hypothesis. That is definitely worth looking at. But that isn't it because they killed Robert too.
So here's Donald Trump making, the big, a very sort of vestigial announcement. It was a real kind of protocol, very sort of staged, if you will. But
they give him binders.
Yeah.
Sir, we have an executive order ordering the declassification of files relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades. And everything will be revealed. Give that to RFK Jr.
Trump lifts veil of.
So the pen goes to RFK Jr. So what's going on here, Ryan? What do you make of the?
It wasn't revealed. There's still redactions, and like I said, you're only playing with the files that went to the review board 92. And the only reason there is a review board 92 is because of JFK the movie. That's what they're reacting to. Like, oh, well, let's get to the bottom of this because there's a lot of public pressure to do this. So what do? They're like, okay, get everything that doesn't involve Angleton, because that's who does it, and classify these and, trickle them out. I'm like, what is the point? Just release them all and make them all unredacted. Nothing ever that's been released that was redacted and then got unredacted or was hidden and then involves ways and means for intelligence or any of the things that are actual national security. It's all just embarrassing. There's nothing in there to protect the intelligence gathering or anything like that. Oswald was part of the false defector program. He's one of the most interesting 27-year-olds ever. He knows all these people, and there's a big story there. But in learning about that assassination, you start learning how the CIA operates. And that's definitely not the only person they ever assassinated. But you see, like, there is a criminal wing to do the dirty stuff that Congress can't appropriate money to go finance Al-Qaeda, for example. Nobody would stomach that. So they have to use shifty black markets to do it. And so it's USAID. And USAID all the way back then was financing paramilitary groups in Laos for the Vietnam War. All the way back then. It is not for it. Well, it is for charities and things. But if you understand, like September 11th, for example, a lot of the money that Al-Qaeda was using came out of supposed charities and mosque that they're not just some religious school or madras somewhere. They have imams working for the Saudis to pay privateers. That's terrorist proxies. That's what they did overseas, and that's what they did in the United States. The Kurdish mosque and Anwar al-Awlaki and all that, who was having lunch at the Pentagon, and Bandar Bush and Tenet are swimming in a pool together after he financed Nawif al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Midhar, who were on Flight 77, and all that's known. And they're all just, let's swim and drink some scotch. Job well done. This is how these people operate because they know the press isn't going to do anything. They're just like, Bin Laden, all alone, pulled this off. 19 guys that have no history whatsoever. Just, I'm being facetious. And whatever. And then the Alex Joneses come in and turn it into such a tar baby with the, airplane denial and whatever, that it just becomes an unapproachable subject. And both the Kennedy assassinations get that too. You get the, what about the lady in the polka dot dress and MK Ultra and blah, blah, blah.
They all
And,
get it though. October 7th, it's almost untouchable.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Every
40
single,
beheaded babies, rapes. You look on Google today and they're still talking about mass rapes.
yeah.
And that never happened.
Yeah, and they'll even pass, atrocity denial legislation that's kind of in the pipeline for this, under this wave of anti-Semitism hysteria.
Did you see the new one from what's the Jewish Committee for Holocaust or something? They made another, like they keep adding to their definition of anti-Semitism, where now if you associate the assassination of Kennedy, and I assume it's going to be Kennedy's soon, with the state of Israel, that's anti-Semitic. It's not anti-Semitic. It's just true. Like, look, first of all, Israel isn't the Jews. So every time you blame an ethnic group for what a state does, you're anti-Semitic. But they see it as the Jewish state. That's their words, not mine. And so whatever it does, that was like all of them did it or something, which is ridiculous.
So I guess the Franklin scandal didn't happen. The FBI didn't bust a Jewish spy. I guess that didn't happen. I guess Netanyahu wasn't blackmailing Bill Clinton with Monica Lewinsky's text messages. That didn't happen. I mean, I could go on and on. There's a bevy of scandals of espionage in the United States.
They spied on the Trump White House with stingrays, listening to his phone. That was in 2017. Yeah, the Stuart Nozette scandal and bribing people in the Navy and stealing secrets and giving them to China. You had the theft of uranium.
Just the Pollard case.
Just the Pollard case alone, yeah. And the fact that they all like put them, Obama paroles them and then Trump lets them out, like,
and Mark
that's
Rich,
what they wanted.
Mark Rich got
yeah, Pincus Green and Mark Rich, massive, and Clinton pardoned him, both of them, on his final hour in office. That's right. Denise Rich finances Hillary's Senate campaign out of New Square. They were selling furniture for $800 a pillow and stuff. Like, here's a sign book. It was clear. And Hillary takes that Senate seat after JFK Jr. took a nosedive in a plane.
My goodness.
Sure, that was an accident in clear weather.
Goodness. Yeah, unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
So just to give a little more meat on the bones of what you're talking about here, Ryan, a very interesting thread by Anya Parampil, who is herself a great journalist.
I was talking about Angleton there. You're on it. And James Morley's he must feel vindicated right now.
Well, let's look at this. She's saying when JFK's mistress, Mary Pinchot Meyer, was murdered in 1964, James Angleton broke into her home, stole her diary, the journal which chronicled their affair, and Mary's effort to aid JFK detente with the Soviets was ultimately destroyed. Angleton was honored with a secret state funeral in Israel, like Robert Maxwell, state funeral upon his death. So WikiLeaks has picked up.
Which the heads of Shin Bet and Mossad all attended this funeral.
Yeah, and here's WikiLeaks, Ryan. The CIA suppressed top officer James Jesus Angleton's connection.
Jesus is James Jesus Angleton.
Jesus Angleton, his connection to Israeli intelligence, as shown by this newly unredacted JFK assassination records file. Angleton had subverted JFK's policy of preventing Israel from acquiring nuclear weapons, and was praised by Mossad head Meyer Emmett as, quote, the biggest Zionist of them all. Wow.
Yeah.
It's quite something. And
they changed the name of that Israeli intelligence service to the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service. So it becomes ISIS.
Yes.
Coincidence.
I noticed that. I noticed that. And Angleton was also found to have hidden documents from the Warren Commission on the assassination of Kennedy. Shortly before he died, Angleton stated, "The better you lied and the more you betrayed, the more likely you would be promoted outside of their duplicity. The only thing they had in common was a desire for absolute power." The file was previously, quote, released in 2017, 2018, and 2022 in redacted form. Here's the document there. Israeli intelligence service. Yeah, so ISIS. So Ryan,
the CIA said, go ahead, like say whatever, but leave Angleton and the Israelis out of it. Well, because that's all you need to leave out of it. That's who did it.
So Ryan, there are clues in here in these files, but you just need to know what to look for and what questions to ask.
You'd have to know what a hardcore Zionist James Angleton was. It would help. They don't mention Ted Shackley in this document, but the Blonde Ghost is another guy you'd like to know his background on. If you knew about Angleton and you knew about Rudolph Sonneborn and you knew it's all in my movie, by the way. It's a lot.
It's in Numec.
Then, yeah, it's all in Numec. Then this becomes crystal clear. And I've done shows just on Angleton with Tim Kelly and some other people. Back in the day, I quit. I just like, I kind of gave up on when I got banned on everything. What's the point? Like, no one's going to see this, and other people just rip off my work and make careers out of it. And yet I get all the heat. I'm the one canceled on everything. I lost money, hurt me, hurt my family. And I'm like, it's not worth it. Because like I said, okay, look, the Israelis killed Kennedy. They were killing hundreds of people in Gaza right now. They're doing it right now. What are you going to do? Nothing. So why should I personally get all this heat and hatred and financial hardship telling the truth about something when something that's even far more obvious that they dance about it? They're proud to slaughter these people and nobody lifts a finger. You know, you don't really have, it's not even necessary to show the Israeli crime, the nuclear theft, killing both of the Kennedys, ad nauseum, all the stuff, selling secrets to the USSR, selling secrets to China, all the things they've done, spying on the US. You know, we didn't even talk about Wiseman and Roseman and that spy ring. And dude, they're killing babies. If killing babies doesn't cross the line, I don't know how this other stuff is going to make any difference. That's my position. I mean, I'll talk about it if someone asks me, but I kind of tapped out. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I was like, wow, we have far easier things to prove right in front of your face that I feel like deserve most of the attention. And that is slaughtering civilians in Lebanon and Gaza. I mean, they're dropping bombs. They drop bombs on apartments in Lebanon too. They killed thousands of people last year, and they never honored it one day of that ceasefire. They were shooting Lebanese and Palestinians every day since January and invaded the West Bank. Yeah. 423 might even be dated. That was what it was when I made the tweet. Now it's unfortunately higher. And I think the world is going to figure out the death toll is in the hundreds of thousands. I think that Lancet report, what was it, last June or July? I don't remember. That had it over like 108,000 or whatever. That's conservative. And then you see the little hints with Trump and Satan Yahoo saying, 1.8 million Palestinians. Like, whoa, where'd the 200,000 go?
You're missing.
Yeah, they just disappeared.
They sneak out from Rafah through the border, or
they all went through that elevator shaft tunnel under the hospital the Israelis blew up.
Yeah.
They were saying they J-damned hospitals. They go, oh, that was a misfire from a Hamas rocket that doesn't have a warhead or anything, but it would just boom, blow up the whole courtyard full of people.
I remember that.
Yeah. They lie so much. It's called the lie saturation. I can't keep up with it. It's so much. Like, but just everything. Like Kennedy said, they always effing lie to me. It's all they ever do. They blew up hospitals. They blew up food trucks. They shot aid workers. They killed 8 aid workers. When I was on your show the other day, they did it like as we were talking. Of the 9 people they killed that day, 8 of them were delivering water. Mm-hmm. It was Al Kahir out of UK, and they just murdered the aid workers. They rape prisoners, and they rape them with like hot iron and weird toys and stuff, and they film it. This is Abu Ghraib all over again, where they sodomize young boys and record their screams and play the torture for their mothers who are passing notes asking their husbands to kill them. They're like just anal raping prisoners. Dumb, San Nibba, the U.S. does it too.
And you get this sort of thing, Ryan, Netanyahu festooning around Washington presents Trump with a golden pager. Our greatest friend and ally, says Benjamin Netanyahu, and
Is
gives
that
us,
like a severed olive tree? I wouldn't doubt it.
that is a cross section of a severed olive tree, I believe, from South Lebanon.
Wow.
I mean, it's like the mafia, basically.
Look at his little grin too. I mean, he's so happy. He's like, yeah, wipe them all out. America's gonna let us do it.
I mean, what kind of a savage? And how can you accept something like this as the president of the United States?
That pager attack is by definition an act of terrorism, and it disproportionately hit doctors and nurses because that's who has pagers. And they said we're gonna just detonate them all at once. It's like Kushner said about Bridgegate. What a badass move. That's how they felt about it. They were bragging about like the cleverness of it. The inhumanity be damned. Like, why you invaded Lebanon? For what? What did they do to you? They help defend Palestinians? They're defending themselves. You're always annexing and encroaching on their territory. You fired at them, and then they reacted. Israel started that. Let's not forget. And Israel was annexed. They flooded the Alaska Mosque on October 4th and 5th, doing rituals on a holy site. Supposedly they were asleep on the wheel on October 7th, but the majority of the deaths, even on October 7th, were from the Hannibal Directive, where they were killing their own. They didn't want them to be hot. They don't care about the hostages. They've killed hostages too. After, like, the hostages that are dead in Gaza were blown up by Israelis. And of course, they blew up that baby and the little kid. And then they said that Hamas strangled them with their bare hands. And even the family said, no, they didn't. You killed our kids.
Yeah, ridiculous.
It was screw Hamas for kidnapping a baby anyway. But the parents were both armed and fighting with them. And they took care. They, ran. And so Hamas grabbed the children. It was, I don't condone any of it, but I understand how it gets to that point where it's like kamikaze pilots in Japan. You get suicide attacks and hostage taking and stuff when there's enough pressure where people get that desperate because they don't have F-15s. They don't have what you have. The Israelis have murdered 233 Palestinians in 2023 before October 7th. Imagine if 233 Jews had been killed throughout the year for just being Jews. It would never happen. If that happened even once, it'll be all over the news. It'd be on blimps in the air. Terrorist attack at cafe or whatever. But they can just shoot people at checkpoints or just on a playground or whatever, just snipe somebody. Somebody goes to rescue them, then they shoot that person in the leg as bait. See, anybody who come rescue them, we'll shoot them too. Like a game. They did that all throughout 2018, the March for Peace. Anybody got near the wall, they just pick a few of them and shoot them in the groin or kneecap them. Sometimes they blow their head off. Laughing about it, filming it, putting the film on the internet. And they're like, wow. The only thing that was preventing them from total ethnic cleansing was a fear of the reaction of the world community. They don't have that fear anymore because they just started doing it and the world turned away.
So the world protected them. The world.
Well, yeah, worse. They gave them more guns and money.
And we all got moral canging from everybody saying, oh, how dare you support these are terrorists, all of them. And there's no civilians.
They go after the students for protesting genocide. And Genocide Joe gives them 2,000-pound bombs and everything else they demanded. And so does Trump. This is not a left-right thing. They all grab their ankles for Israel. And they call it gaffy. On a scale of 1 to Nikki Haley, how gaffy are you? Because there's nobody, not even John Bolton, there's nobody more is like gaffy than her. She's doing somersaults. She's grabbing them so fast.
It's hard to put it nicely. Let's just say that.
Lindsey Graham's pretty close.
Yeah.
But he grabs his ankles all the time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he gets that itch down there, right above the
Yeah, his socks are itchy
right above the shoe line. Yeah, it's
from his
just
pantyhose.
a lot of senators have that. It's a rash type thing. They have
Tom
to
Cotton's got it.
constantly be scratching that, so it's very awkward.
Eczema of the feet. That's what he's got.
That's exactly right, Ryan. How did you know about that? And a lot of people don't know that. Yeah. Back to JFK, Ryan, because there's an important part of this that you've also been talking about, not just this release, but when they were so-called releasing the Epstein files, because a lot of people have very funny ideas about what's in these releases, and you pointed out so many times, Ryan, and very, very, very well. Then, and I don't know if everyone's listening, but you're saying a lot of this stuff is already in the public domain.
Yeah, it was.
So how much of these big theatrical releases, Ryan, are just theater?
Well, like the part about we have new Jewish backers has been out since 1967. There's no internet in 1967, so okay. But that document was released in 2017 with when Trump was releasing documents. I put it on the website and explained it all over again, and how Jack Ruby went to the Warren Commission and said, this goes all the way to the top. I had to do this for my people. If I didn't, there'd be a program if people found out what happened. What are you talking about, Ruby? What people? Jacob Rubenstein, when he's the guy that shot Oswald, for anybody who doesn't know, and then dies of stomach cancer. But yeah, and he ran a carousel club for the Masello brothers, Joe and Carlos Masello, the mob boss of Louisiana, of New Orleans, and that's where the cell is with Guy Bannister and Clay Shaw and Lee Harvey Oswald in New Orleans with the Fair Play for Cuba committee and you can unravel this whole mess. But yeah, you asked me about Epstein. Everything in the binders and stuff these are all online already. And whatever else comes out, I'm going to predict this right here, right now. The truckloads of information that Pam Bondi is going to say is what came out on January 3rd, a year ago. It's a trunket of names and things, but it's all documents that were already released. All the court filings out of the Virgin Islands with Denise George is online right now. It's available. Everything from Virginia Roberts, Farmer, all the people, the victims, it's all available online. You can read the lawsuits to Deutsche Bank, the lawsuits to JP Morgan Chase, the lawsuits to Global Apollo from Leon Black, the settlements from Prince Andrew and others. They've paid out the nose. Jess Staley's paying out the nose. Leon Black had to pay $65 million. Prince Andrew had to pay 16 million pounds, I think, maybe not dollars, whatever, but something, millions of dollars. Morgan had to pay $290 million. So punishments have been dished out. Jean-Luc Brunel was arrested and then died in his jail in France. He hung himself, allegedly, all on his own. Maxwell was arrested. Epstein was arrested. Arrests were made. Lawsuits were settled. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been paid out to victims. It's not like nobody on the client list got persecuted. Yes, they did. It just wasn't loudly said on your TV because they don't want you looking at Jamie Dimon and Jess Staley and the people that facilitated the hush money for Epstein, who are all playing stupid. Like, oh, I didn't know him. I didn't know what this money was for. These $20,000 cash deposits to 16-year-olds. They did know. And that's why they've had to settle quietly. They are the good news is a lot of victims have been paid. They've been compensated for being routinely raped, sold out, groomed. But they're keeping a lid on the Johns. They're not going to. The bank pays them. Well, in the case of Andrew and Leon, their names came out and they had to pay. But there's a few, but mostly they won't say who the John was. The court knows. But here's how you can figure it out, because you can go through and see, well, who are what the emails going back and forth between Epstein and who. And then somebody pays all this money. Like, that has to be this person, you know?
Yeah.
And that was available. It's just, you'd have to do a little bit of work and go in and read all the files, and because there are false accusations too. That happens every time there's a rape case, especially when famous people. Oh yeah, me. But you look all the way back in the 90s and stuff, the people that were saying this before it was famous, before he got arrested in the early 2000s, before the rearrest in 2019, the girls that can describe the interior of his house, what color his bathroom was, what color the massage table was, what pictures, they had definitely been on those properties. And there's no reason for a 15-year-old to have ever been to any of these places. They're telling the truth. And they'll tell you about Glenn Dubin and Ava Dubin, his wife, raped these girls. They'll tell you about the little camp at Zorro Ranch where they lie to them and say, oh, you're all going to be there. And then they get there and they're alone. Les Wexner. And Les Wexner is he's the bridge between the old school gun running ring and the new pedo ring. He's in his 80s and he was there the whole time.
But that's all in the court documents, right?
It all is in one court document or another. You have statements from Epstein's own staff, right? His pilots released a flight log and a black book. His bodyguards, his chefs, his chauffeurs, they've all told on him. They had no one to tell, but once you could, they all did. And then, of course, the victims themselves tell you who raped them. So there you go. And then so you match that, like, if this is out of a victim's mouth and corroborated by someone, employee of Epstein, and they're flying around on the planes and their name's in the black book, and then especially if they end up having to pay money out of the nose in a lawsuit, then that's a client. Definitely. Depends how many data points you have. Wexner's basically gave him a house for like 20 grand. He gets a school that's now became a house, the Epstein Rape Mansion in New York. Puts him out on the board of trustees for the Wexner Foundation. And the Wexner Foundation is financing Israeli prime ministers and meeting with them too. Epstein was meeting with Ehud Barak. Ehud Barak personally visited Epstein when he was in jail dozens of times. And he's photographed going in and out of the rape mansion in New York. You can't just give him a call. Why would you go in person to an Epstein property? It's only one reason. You know what they're doing in there. He always had little kids around him. And it's the same way when he went to Bear Stearns, when Ace Greenberg and these people bring him in, he did not create this pedo ring. He walked into a pre-existing structure. Maxwell is who brought him in. Those art schools, financed by Leon Black, by the way, those New York weirdo art schools and stuff were part of this operation. They'd prey on young girls. And it's, oh, I can help your career. Because like if I buy your painting, you're now an artist. It's a very it's Hunter Biden way of laundering money. Very classic, because you can't objectively judge art. It's a way to just move. And so like, oh yeah, well, I'll pay for you to go to this art school, blah, blah, blah. And if you become a top girl, you know, you get good at it, you rope people in, you get them to return, you know, you're going to sell a lot of paintings or whatever their medium is. And that was some of the bullshit they were doing. And then, of course, the Abigail Wexner Foundation was involved in a lot of universities too. And that's what there's an Epstein map there. There's a smaller map. That white page there goes in the Schoensteins and the McCains and the Lincoln Project. Now, there's a bunch of pedophiles there too. This is just the way it is. The Bear Stearns had plenty of perverts before Epstein was brought in there.
Just to be clear, when we say these things, everything you're talking about is public, is in the public.
Yeah, I mean, they've been prosecuted. Like, it's not even guessing.
I just want to do my diligence there. That's in the public domain.
Employees for the Lincoln Project got popped for kitty fiddling.
Yeah,
and there was the guy that gives the physicals. I guess he was like the school doctor at Ohio State University, who was there because of Wexner. They named a gymnasium after him. Who got popped for fiddling little boys. It's constant. And the white collar crimes to the liquid funding at Bear Stearns, Ireland, and the things that Epstein set up, the Ponzi scheme at Tower Financial, where Steve Hoffenberg went to jail for what they did, but Epstein did not. But it was all Epstein. He was the brain. Well, somebody through Epstein was the brain. Epstein couldn't even spell his name correctly on the board. You look at it here, Stein, Stine, on the board. Maybe he didn't want him to know his name. I don't know. But yeah, of course he works at a high school. He wants to be at a high school. The math teacher. He could play piano. He impressed. That's something he could do. That's why he really did have a music room on his island. That was something he did and he was passionate about. And that's what it was. It was a music room. The girls have been in there now. It wasn't some dungeon or whatever. Like people talking about submarines and all this stuff. No, they brought them in by helicopter from St. Thomas. Maxwell actually got a license. She got a green helicopter because he liked green, and would ferry them in. It's the weird word we say ferry, even though it's in the air. But yeah, and St. Thomas knew. They knew what are you doing over there with all these very young blonde ballerina type body, always the same, bringing them in over and over and over again on a private island. To what are you going to play the piano for them? And people would visit there, and there's topless girls. The question, not all of them were underage, practically. This is how billionaires behave. Peter Nygaard did the same stuff. Robert Miller did similar things. Robert Miller would have threesomes with high school girls daily for years. And just openly in hotels, he finally got wised up and bought homes, and he would do it in the houses. That's the famous hockey bag incidents. He's sick, man. Like, do you know about this? He'd have a room downstairs full of like CDs and things little girls would like, clothing and jewelry and stuff. He's like, you can fill up one hockey bag as much as you can carry in one hockey bag, and that's yours. That was how he paid him. Disgusting.
So that's that whole farrago. But just, you know, we've got a few.
But he's a billionaire. Now he's going to jail, but it's a little late. He's in his 80s. Peter Nygaard was in his 80s when he finally, he got subpoenaed. He just ignored it. You know, he finally got, and he's in jail now. Nygaard is in jail. But Peter Nygaard was raping all these young black women in the Bahamas. He'd have these parties and they play foosball and volleyball and stuff. But then he drug women, and he was into scat, and it's nasty, man. And he got away with this for years and years. And Prince Andrew visited him too. And I don't think it was to play foosball.
No.
Prince Andrew is the Kevin Bacon of pedo rings.
6 degrees of 2 degrees of separation.
He cut his own vacation short with his wife to go visit Peter Nygaard, who's like 20 years older than him. What?
Maybe they were, he's giving him stock trading advice or something.
Yeah. Can't do that on the phone either.
Or they had a common interest in collecting butterflies and rare insects from the Caribbean species.
He had a property war with this other billionaire. His last name is Bacon, from North Carolina. And he also got into it with Sean Connery. And Sean Connery did not like Peter Nygaard at all. He sued him. So it's something.
Nygaard was he Canadian, right?
He was.
Very wealthy Canadian.
Nygaard is a clothing brand for women that he had. But his operation was out of the Caribbean. He'd be in the Bahamas mostly. But he mostly raped Bohemians, whatever, but he did get an American and 2 Canadians, and that was his downfall. Because they have rights.
Yeah. Well, look, just to wrap up, back to the JFK, the main piece. So I'm going to play this clip and tell us what we can expect, how this is going to play out for the duration of this story, because I know you probably have your idea of how this is going to unfold from an informational and political point of view. But this is University of Virginia, so this is right your old stomping grounds, Ryan.
Yep. I used to live in
Charlotte. A long list. I can't even begin to go through all of the items that we've listed that we want to look at. But there are places where there have been redactions in sensitive documents. That's our first priority, because there's a reason why we've got a sensitive document. We can tell it's a sensitive document. Other pieces of it reveal sensitive information, but there must be something really, really sensitive for them to redact. a paragraph or a page or multiple pages in a document like that. Some of it's about Cuba, some of it's about what the CIA did or didn't do relative to Lee Harvey Oswald. Some of it is about assassination plots against Castro and, for all we know, other people.
So how's this does that give you any clues of how they're managing this?
Well, you can take an assassination plot against Fidel Castro and just recycle it in Dallas. My God, you had people before he was killed saying they're going to kill Kennedy. They're going to shoot him from a high rise. You had some of the strippers for Jack Ruby, one of them in a hospital, saying they're going to kill Kennedy. It's going to happen tomorrow. And they dismissed it because, like, oh, well, you're a prostitute. And in the 60s, that's like, you're not a real person. You're the harlot of the whore of Babylon or whatever. But what the world would make a woman say something like that? Because they were talking about it. And they would talk about it in front of these girls like they have no agency and like it didn't matter. But they do have agency. These are people. They know who Kennedy is. You said you're going to kill him. They're going to repeat that. You have the fact, too, that all these people, Roger Craig, Johnny Roselli, all these people getting run off the road, murdered, shot after Kennedy, people who were testifying get disappeared. That guy, he looks so, it's weird. I'm older than him, way older than him. But I researched it when I was way younger than him, right? For 10 years. Yeah, it's weird. I'm older than Kennedy, too. That's really weird.
Speaking of strippers, Ryan, there's a character who's kind of fronting this story. She's a congresswoman, and Anna Paulina Luna, and this clip just drove the conservative right crazy. They love this woman. She's so based. I'll just play this very, very brief clip, and then I just find this to be very, very circumspect. But here she is.
What's your priority list? Is Epstein 9/11?
Our first investigation will be announced, but it's going to be covering on a thorough investigation into the John F. Kennedy assassination. And I can tell you, based on what I've been seeing so far, the initial hearing that was actually held here in Congress was actually faulty in the single bullet theory. I believe that there were two shooters, and we should be finding more information as we are able to gain access into the SCIF, hopefully before the files are actually released to the public.
So all the words, the SCIF, she says, I believe there are two shooters. So she's trying to own the two-shooter theory and become like the expert. And it's just the
single bullet theory is from the JFK, the movie. It's the Garrison stuff back and to the left. Like, everybody saw that. Like, oh, do you think a bullet made all these entry wounds and hit Conley? Yeah.
But she's positioned,
which they find on a gurney at the hospital later. This is like the over focus of the physics of 9/11. Like, look, I think that based on eyeballing it, that building came down too fast. Therefore, there was TNT on every floor. Like, shut up.
So she's the face. She's been like made the face of the release of JFK, Epstein, 9/11, etc.
She's telling them what they want to hear. And what's funny is
she's selected for this role.
Every single one of these things, 9/11, Epstein, JFK, RFK, MLK, are my bread and butter. There's all stuff I've been talking about my whole life. And it's what everybody wants to know. And then I'm canceled on everything except X very recently, and I'm still shadow banned. From 2009 to 2023, I wasn't allowed on anything. I wasn't allowed on X. They canceled all my YouTubes, all my stuff. I have been talking about these files and all of these things for decades. I've been talking about 9/11 since it happened. I was talking about Epstein since about 2007 onward. I have covered RFK. This Thursday, I'm going to walk through that whole assassination. But like some of the largest shows I can get on they're related to other things. They're big for some other reason, not really dedicated to politics. But I have nowhere else to go. I need like shows like this. I'm so glad to be on. But we're not, face it, you and I, we're not the Rogans. We're not the really, really big shows. It's important enough for this information to have a platform like that, but it never will. They'll have on someone who learned something from somebody, who learned something from me, whatever, who do their best. But like, why just go to the source? I have been talking about all of these and literally mapped it out. There's Numec's that green one, Epstein's that white one. I even put it on a t-shirt. Like, here's your client list. Put the whole first page out. I did a 5-hour documentary on the Iraq War on September 11th, what really happened. But it's like they want a mystery. And what she did right there was saying, I think there was 2 shooters. Like, oh yeah, what are you, 20 something years old, maybe 32? I don't know how old she is, but like, you don't know shit. You watched a movie, JFK the movie, and you're just reiterating a talking point. That's it. And that movie's executive producer was Arnan Milchan, the largest arms dealer for Israel, who helped smuggle Krytron triggers through Heli Trading Company with Netanyahu to Israel, which is a part you need, and nuclear weapons. So, of course, that film doesn't mention the Israelis. It's all Bay of Pigs, CIA, blah, blah, blah. Great film. Kevin Costner and Pesci and all as Ferry was entertaining. Like Braveheart is a great movie, entertainment, not historically accurate at all, but fun.
Was there any Israel content in that film that was edited out that you know of, or
there is an Easter egg where they have Permadex written on a newspaper, but like you would never know what that is unless you already knew what that was. And a guy who did great research into that was Michael Collins Piper, and he wrote a book called Final Judgment. It's kind of disorganized because this is such a huge topic. It's very hard. I jump around, like there isn't a clean way. Oh, and how about this? Oh, and this. Yeah, it's very hard to tell this story. But Piper got into Permadex with Clay Shaw and Timur Rosenbaum and all that. That's the Swiss clique that Israel uses for umpteen zillion money laundering operations. And that's the only thing like distantly related to Israel in that whole film was like a word written on a newspaper that nobody would recognize.
So Netanyahu involved in the nuclear acquisition of the nuclear weapons for Israel.
Way later, like Zalman Shapiro and these guys are the progenitors of the theft of uranium. But later on in the 80s, when they were smuggling Krytron triggers, something you use in the miniaturization and use of a warhead and nuclear bomb, that was Arnan Milchan on the American side through Heli Trading Company. And on the receiving side was a young Benjamin Netanyahu, who ends up becoming a multi-time prime minister and the longest reigning prime minister of Israel. He helped bring in parts for nuclear weapons.
And you document this in your up on screen Numec, right?
I do. Yep.
The details, the timeline, the dates, the names. It's there.
Yep. Roger Monson's got that in his book. And I've gone to conferences in DC that IRMEP, the Institute for Research in Middle Eastern Policy, was one of the co-sponsors of these groups. And they would have speakers come on. Jefferson Morley was there too. I met him. And they would go over the theft of uranium and that part of it. Now, they didn't link it to Kennedy, but they strongly were like, well, the Kennedy sure didn't like it. But if you dig a little, and when you're talking about Epstein, I think Bobby Baker was the Epstein of that time period. He had dirt on a lot of people, as did Meyer Lansky and Frank Costello. They had the goods on Hoover and Clyde Tolson. And so we were like, how do you get all this blackmail? Like, well, Hoover had all this blackmail. Him and his G-men were blackmailing everybody. If you blackmail the blackmailer, you now have everyone they have. It's like vampires. It's like you get what all the dirt that he could get with the FBI and all the reach that has. Well, if you get the head of the FBI, or you get the head of if you have the head of counterintelligence of the CIA, that is now yours. And like you said, why are the heads of the intelligence agencies, of the Shin Bet and the Mossad and the former heads, they're all at Angleton's funeral. And then they name a forest after him. Because he did it for Israel. And with Kennedy out of the way, they were allowed to build nukes and invade their neighbors. And they started the 6-Day War and they grabbed all that property. And they held that all the way to the Yom Kippur War in 1973. So they annexed that land. for another 10 years.
So
practically.
history, so definitely it was a history altering, geopolitical history altering event, the assassination of, in your opinion, of John F. Kennedy.
It was the complete capture of the United States, because once LBJ got in and he picked all these Zionist hardliners, it's what we call the blob, all these appointed positions in the Pentagon and all that. Most of the U.S. government's not elected. You just vote for Congress and the presidency, really. You have your Senate and your House and the presidency. The vice president's kind of automatic with the president. And then everybody in the DOD, everybody in the FBI, everybody in the CIA, there's some Senate confirmations and things involved, but it's all through appointees. And there are people there, like a classic example, someone like Henry Kissinger, who's just there for like 6 or 7 administrations in a row. Even when he's 100, he's still giving advice. The blob doesn't move, and the blob hires itself. So you get in what's called ethnic nepotism or criminal nepotism, where they will never allow anyone in who isn't in the clique, and the clique remains, and it grows. So once you get a guy in, it's like the green dots thing. If green dots only hire other green dots, over time, the green dots will capture every industry, because other dots will hire whoever. But once the green one's there, it remains green forever, because they won't let anyone else in. And that's how over time you end up with all the levers of power. Now, usually the other dots will notice, hey, how come the green ones are only hiring other green ones and do everything for green dots when we're all different dots? And like, how? But that backlash doesn't come. We're like, well, you're just anti-green dotism, whatever. Mm. And so, Jewish supremacists can get in. And I'm not saying that this is not they're not biologically that way, or that people make these stupid, crass arguments. But listen, there are people, you like North Koreans like this too. I mean, South Korea is just as Korean as North. They're definitely opposite. Israel is run by hardline fanatics that think God's a real estate agent and the settlers are there and they're killing Amalek, and that's their warped worldview based on the Old Testament, where Jacob got in a wrestling match with an angel. God gave this dirt to our ethnic group. And those are the type of weirdos who constantly hire one another and only one another.
Fellow traveler.
Until they get regulatory capture of something. Yeah. And the same, if it goes media, banking, whatever it is, they will end up absorbing all levers of power within an industry by engaging in prejudiced hiring practices. And the normal backlash to that is to point out you're engaging in prejudiced hiring practices, and they can shut that all down by going, that's anti-Semitic, and that it works.
Yep. It's a high-powered social network, and that's how things get done. This is how consolidation happens. That's how the system is tightened up. And yeah, exactly. It's. I
mean, the Italian mafia used to run California. They had the governor, they had most of the mayors, they ran that state. And, Nixon helped that along too. He brought a lot of them in. It was very hard to break that. They run in Vegas. And of course, they would only comport with other Italians. That was part of the family. It's part of their, it's not Italians, it's these Italians. They have this attitude. And the same thing with these Jewish Zionists. It's not a byproduct of genetics, obviously, and it's not the entire religion, because everybody interprets the same religion different ways. But it's the one that's useful for states are the fanatics. The version of Islam that's going to end up in Syria are the crazies, because they are sponsored from the outside. Regular Sunni, regular Shia, they don't have a chance.
Nope. Same in Ukraine. Same with
the neo-Nazis in Ukraine, cartels in Mexico, Al-Shabaab in Somalia, Boko Haram, MEK, Baluchistani terror. You can go ad nauseum. All of these have support from outside powers, and they all engage in this crap. The tribalism in Africa, pick one. The reason that it gets that way, and the reason it's not a theological debate or anything. The reason you have Sunni Shia is because Sunni hire other Sunni, Shia hire other Shia. And so it's a fight for political power, because unless your group is in charge, you're completely out. And so they both have legit arguments like, well, if we let the other side get in and they only hire one of each other and not us, then they're going to have all the political power and they get the jobs and they get they want. It's not an argument about the lineage of Muhammad or anything of a theological debate. It's just tribalism with a religious theme. So that's the danger of any kind of nepotism, whether it's based on race or faith or some cliquish thing, is that comes at the exclusion of everyone else. And then by necessity, everyone else says, well, we can't let you in because then we'll be pushed out. That's why you have to have pluralism. But what happens every time there's a pluralistic leader in the Middle East? Gaddafi out, Assad out, Saddam out.
Pluralistic Arab nationalist, a secular government out. Just quickly,
Israel too. The Zionists were back from day one. Regular Jews had no chance. It was always going to be a Zionist state.
Yep, that's what you have now. It's extreme as it's ever been. Completely off the charts.
It's manifest destiny level crazy. What Trump said about moving Gazans out to Jordan or Egypt or whatever it was, it's Trail of Tears.
Yeah,
Let's take the Apaches, stick them in Oklahoma. It was that level of bad.
I mean, lack of self-awareness or lack of understanding of history. How could you say anything, even to know that it just even resembles that episode of history in America?
Well, they'd force him out with Apache helicopters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ironically, the name of the
the Tomahawk cruise missiles and Kiowa warriors and all. They named the 7th Brigade, the Cavalry Brigade. It's all mechanized now, but it's called the Crazy Horse Brigade. Destroyed the 7th Cavalry and killed Custer. They named it after him. Hooray.
Yeah, that's something in itself.
Very first casualty of the Second Iraq War is a Native American woman. Yeah.
Quick.
Yeah, it's really like melts your brain. Like, wow, he got up on TV and said, let's just move 2 million people somewhere else. And then they said, would you let the Gazans come back? Well, why would they want to? That's where they're from. I don't know. But look at it. It's all destroyed. It's all destroyed because the little gremlin sitting next to you smirking blew it up.
Yeah. They turned it into rubble. Didn't just happen to dissolve in thin air, dustify on its own. But Ryan, before we go, the one thing I wanted to ask you was, when you talked about mafias, Italian mafia, Jewish mafia with JFK. When you see names like Sam Giancana coming up, and then you've got Jack Ruby, and then you've got Meyer Lansky, you got the Havana set, all this stuff. How would you read this? How do you read through the noise on this? How do you interpret that?
Well, the Italians lost probably $1 billion in revenue when Batista was kicked out by Fidel. They lost, except for Sanchez Trafficante. They left him alone because he worked with the right people. But they had every reason to want to kill the Kennedys. And Hoffa discussed with Carmine Galante about a contract killing of RFK. And of course they're going to talk about it. Of course they want someone to get rid of them. But they didn't have the means to do it. But the Israelis did, because they had the CIA counterintelligence office. And so that's why they're very excited. We have new Jewish backers. Like, they're going to take them out.
That was in the cable. Yeah, that's in the files. Yeah.
And that's out of the Chicago outfit, which that's Giancana you're talking about. He was a wheelman. He was a driver. Very good at losing the cops and things. They shot him in the mouth to make him shut up. They killed Roselli and cut up his body and put it in drums and threw it in a Florida lake. He probably could have floated out of the Gulf of America. But it is amazing that they found him. I mean, you're in a drum, but he was testifying to the Select Committee on Assassinations. They didn't want that. And the Italian mafia, people are like, oh, well, Hollywood's all Italian mob. No, that's the largest mob. Was not the Jewish mob. It was the Italian mob. or at least on par. They ran a lot of things, and they worked together. Lansky took over for Lucky Luciano. So Luciano's Italian, Lansky's Jewish. That, what they call Cosa Nostra, it's a made-up term. They had a meeting. This is almost like a Batman comic. They had like an organized crime meeting in New York, Hotel 14, all that. And they bring it in the heads of different cities. And a lot of them were Italian and a lot of them were Jewish. And they decided to work together. And as they had done, it wasn't like that in the beginning. They were very ethnic, segregated. But Lansky sort of tied the two together. And so Italians had more muscle and hitmen and things. And what happened was the great mafia cities like Chicago, Cleveland, New York, in the north, the business was moving south. It was New Orleans, Dallas, Miami. Why? Narcotics. Narcotics became the biggest revenue producer. It wasn't the coin machines and the slot machines and rigging baseball games and the Teamsters and the unions and all that. They all made money. The gambling, horse racing, all that. But narcotics would surpass all the rest of it put together. And based on just geography, because a lot of the narcotics is coming out of Honduras, for example, with heroin out of Star Furniture, Lorex, blah, blah, blah. That's with Sammy Corona and O.K. Allen out of Louisiana. The importance of the Traficantes, the Marcellos, and these Southern mob raises in prominence. So Lansky starts getting all this real estate in Florida, for example. This is a long story, but anyway, the Northern mob starts moving south, and there wasn't a clear boss of Dallas. And New York and Chicago, we call Chicago the outfit. You can call New York the Mafia or the 5 Points or whatever. You get the Lucchese's, GFSE, Gambino later, Bonanno, Columbia, whatever. They all Colombo is a big one. They kind of vie for power back and forth. Sort of ends up between GFSE and Gambino near the end, but Chicago was trying to get Dallas, and Ruby was a Chicago guy, but he worked with the Southern mob. There was a syndicate from Tampa to New Orleans to Dallas of the same girls that would work at the same clubs. And so he was an outfit guy. And they had him killed all because when they killed Officer Tippett, it's called a 999 when you kill a cop, especially in Texas. They figured cops are going to kill Oswald as soon as they see him. But he went into a theater. So they didn't do that. And his partner was there. Tippett's partner was there when they arrested Oswald. So they had to pull an audible. So they had a transfer. So he'd be, unprotected for a moment. And then they sent Ruby in to shoot him in the stomach. And he did. And he's pleading with the Warren Commission. He's saying all this ridiculous stuff about his people and the Jews and stuff. It's all there. It's in the Warren. Like, oh, the Warren Commission was a cover up. Like, go read Ruby's statements. He's telling you everything. And when they interview in the press, he's like, I can't say what I want to say. This goes all the way to the top. All the way to the top means LBJ.
Right.
All the way to the top. And he's like, if you knew, the facts will never come out, he was saying. He knew he's dead. And the first people to visit Ruby in jail, go look at who visited Ruby in jail. Who is he talking to? Come on. This isn't rocket surgery. It's just there's so many paths to nowhere. Like, they're arguing about a magic bullet. Like, yeah, dude, his brain went out the back of his head. He was shot from the front. That's that. You don't need to argue about, could a bullet go this way, and ricochet. Shut up. It's a stupid thing to get sucked into. That wasn't he's shot in the throat. He's shot in the head. He's shot from behind too. He's another shooter, but they drove him into a kill zone. And they had planned that. They were originally going to do that in Chicago, but he canceled. And they got him in Dallas. But Bill Decker and all, 75% of the police force were on Ruby's payroll. They would go to the carousel club with the girls. He had dirt on a lot of them too. He was a little not quite as successful as Mickey Cohen, but Ruby knew how to blackmail. He knew how to schmooze. And Bill Decker arrested suspects and let them go that day. He was the chief of police. It's a very long story to explain Dealey Plaza, but suffice to say, the Jewish and Italian mob were never independent of state backing. They always had support. And a lot of it comes from the liquor giants, which the U.S. created because of Prohibition.
That's right.
Made the mafia as strong as it was. And the same thing happened in Russia. Same reason. They imagine Russia banned vodka. That didn't work. But when you create black markets, you create organized crime. And once they reach money to a certain level, they're able to be very professional and set up business fronts. And, they'd run stuff like they'd run a racetrack, and they'd have one in Mexico and one in the U.S. You're not allowed to gamble in the U.S., but you can in Mexico. So they would just process bets on the American races in Mexico. And then you'd have places like the U.S. National Bank of San Diego, which the mob ran, facilitating the money flow and the bets and loan sharking and blah, blah, blah. Any mob historian, someone like Doug Ballantyne, they can get into the nitty gritty of it. All these things they're doing. Nixon brings a lot of men. LBJ had a lot of men. They're all working for it. They hated the Kennedys. Kennedy was doing what Elon Musk is pretending to do. He really was going after the rot. Both of them. They were going after the rot. They were going after the money laundering. You're not going to showboat. You're not going to be an open mob boss like John Gotti did later. And he went to jail. You're stupid. It's supposed to be a secret society, idiot. And when you do stuff out in the open, when you get a little too famous, you get shot or cut up and put in a drum. The real hardcore mobsters aren't famous names because they didn't run their mouth and run around showboating everything they did. And some of the big money makers, they've reformed. And there's guys around today. Michael Francine, I like him, but he did definitely have a gas scam for a long time, made a lot of money. And he paid for it. So did his father, and he found Christ, and he's a good guy. I mean, I believe in second chances. I feel like somebody can totally change their life around, and that's someone who did. But he wasn't a big name, but he was a big money maker. But that's the thing. You don't know the big money makers. Well, you can, but it's not like Capone or the famous names, the Hoffas and stuff. They put the face out too much. And what Robert Kennedy especially, he was going in and putting face. He was having trials, and they're on TV, and people were laughing about it. People love lawyer stuff. People love court cases. O.J. Simpson dominated. Yeah, America. Oh, yeah. 2/3 of the world's lawyers are in America. It is court drama. Whether it's Johnny Depp to O.J. Simpson, they're sucked in, man. And you got to realize the gravity of this. When Kennedy was grilling these mobsters, it's interesting. It's the Kennedy brothers, and it's like the mafia, which Hoover denied existed.
Yeah.
But you're finding out, these mob bosses, these Dick Tracy goons, which were based on mob, like Marvel Comics and stuff. When they're talking about the Magia, and when they have Carmine Falcone in DC Comics, they call him the Roman. It's Carmine Galante. They have the Magia as the mafia. The Kingpin character is based on Galante. It's real stuff that they could draw from and real crimes, and they put them in comic books and things. But even children are interested in this stuff. The mafia is intrinsically fascinating. It is. Criminals look at all the women who watch true crime and fall in love with crooks for some reason. They're in it. Oh, there it is. That's shortly before he was killed. Wow. Connolly got shot too. Let's not forget.
So he definitely a stand down order. The Secret Service walked away. That seems to be kind of an
walking away. What? Why? I have to do this.
Protesting, right? Almost protesting.
Yeah.
So we can safely say, just before we go, your final verdict, release of JFK files, is it a nothing burger? Is this Trump WWF? Is this the Blobs WWF?
It's both. It's kayfabe, but in a way, even if it's a bunch of redundant files, nobody read the old files. So this is a pretext to get people to see the other files too. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Even though there is not much in these files, it doesn't look like. So there's a lot of stuff in the other files, and you can just release those as if they came out yesterday when they didn't.
Right.
There's a lot of the things on the Israelis that they're going over are things that we JFK researchers have been pulling their hair out, trying to get people to hear. And because there's all this interest, they might listen to it. Same thing with Epstein. Like Bindergate was stupid. It was a bunch of redundant crap. But it gave me a chance to talk about Epstein again because there's this renewed public interest in it. Because they all thought, oh, here it comes. You're not going to get a smoking gun. The government's not going to tell on itself. But the fact that they said, we're going to redact anything about Angleton and the Israeli intelligence is answering you without answering you. By showing you what you're not allowed to see, they're telling you exactly where you're supposed to look. That is who had Kennedy killed. And the why, it was mostly over the nuclear weapons, but it was also right of return. It was, they didn't like Algerian independence either. That was another big one. That's why they tried to kill de Gaulle. They didn't want another giant independent Muslim state. But the uranium theft, I mean, imagine if the world knew that Israel stole nuclear weapons from the United States. It would have been over for them.
And we did a space the other night on X, Ryan, and you got cut out by the algorithm or whatever. You were I think you named the shooter the JFK.
I did. I named both, and I said about RFK as well. And then I was like, no one reacted, and I was listening on the phone and go, no one heard that. X is buggy. I don't think that was the NSA or anything. It just, that's happened to me when I'm not saying anything important too. It just happened to be like that.
Thomas, I remember you talking about Thomas Noguchi, the coroner, I think.
Thomas Noguchi was the coroner that showed the powder burn marks on the back of RFK's head, right below his ear.
Mm-hmm.
And William Harper was another one, police chief, and the examiner. They went, there's too many bullets. You got a gun that shoots 8 times, shooting 13 times. It's based on acoustic evidence. It's based on eyewitnesses, and it's based on pulling bullets out of the bodies of 5 other people got shot. Kennedy gets 3 times, then 1 through his coat. You got a bullet in the ceiling. So you have too many shots, and you have different cannulars on the bullets. It's the rings that go in that put it, when you put it in a clip, it helps it grip it. Thane's had 2 and the others had 1. Sirhan's had 1. Or it could be vice versa. Thane Eugene Caesars, who shot Kennedy. He worked for A Security all of a day. He was hired by John Alessio, who was a mobster. The other security guards at the Ambassador Hotel didn't have any bullets in their guns. Everybody dressed in brown was just there as like, you know, physical, like move.
You're talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. now.
Yeah, Robert F. Kennedy. And because you brought up Thomas Noguchi, so he's a coroner for Robert, who showed, like, without a doubt, the shot had to be fired from an inch or less away because you don't get powder burns. And they also did chemical tests on his suit. So that gun was, he went do like that. Shot him here, shot him in the neck, shot him through the like shoulder pad. And so there's, when you shoot a gun, you know, the flame comes out, like that's what hit him. They burned him. He's got powder burn. So you can't be 2 feet away, 6 feet away and make that happen, especially in front of somebody, hit him in the back. And the CBS reporter saw Thane pull his gun out and shoot. He thought he was shooting back at Sirhan. And witnesses heard, you know, over 8 shots. They're like 12 to 14 was the consensus. And the FBI would just change statements and go 8. Like, I didn't say 8. So even if you argued, well, you're just going off of memory, you're you have it in your head, you could get that wrong. But if you said 12 to 14, they should write down 12 to 14. The fact that they changed it to 8 because they needed it to be 8 means they changed what you said. So even if you were wrong, that still isn't what you told them. You can't just change what the witnesses say, but they did. And then, I mean, Harper got his car shot up before he was to test during the trial. And then Sirhan lawyers are Grant Cooper and Russell Parsons' stuff. They all work for the mob. Parsons was investigated by the head of the Senate Racket Committee, which was Robert F. Kennedy. Like, the people he's investigating are the lawyers for Sirhan. And they weren't there to defend Sirhan. They were there to defend themselves. They're like, this is all on you. It is not going to spread any further than this. Thane Caesar said he sold his gun. They know he has a 22 caliber gun because the cops all get one. He's like, I got a 36. Like, do you have a 22? Also, yeah, I sold it 3 months ago. Well, who to who? And they go and get the receipt, and he sold it in September, 3 months after he shot Kennedy. We have the fucking receipt. I don't know, like the acoustic evidence, the physical evidence, the ballistic evidence, the eyewitness testimony. They saw him firing. He himself said, yeah, I pulled my gun out, but I didn't fire it. Yes, you did. They saw you do it, and they heard you do it. And there's bullets in the wall from where you did it. That John Pilger, probably the most reliable journalist ever. I'm going to say that.
I knew John
was there. He's behind Sirhan, and the person next to him got shot. Sirhan wasn't firing backwards. That was a shot probably that went through the coat, or one he missed that hit a bystander. But the shots are hitting people behind Sirhan on that side of the room, because Thane is firing in that direction. And John said this, and he went on it. John Pilger is super reliable.
Yeah.
He said, the man next to me, and we were here. Okay, they're here. Kennedy's here. Thane is here. These people are getting shot by Thane. It wasn't. As Sirhan, they put a paper in his pocket about the Israel-Palestinian conflict, and he just happens to be a Palestinian Christian. How on the nose can you be? Or who they want to blame it on? Oh, yeah, a Palestinian Christian killed Robert Kennedy all by himself. He was in debt. He worked at the Corona Horse Ranch for Frank Donaramus with another mobster from Jersey. Like, God, he was $28,000 in debt. They're like, you're going to go here or a gun. And he may have just been firing off, missing on purpose because he didn't want to shoot anybody, whatever. But he was going full. Well, they're going to kill him anyway.
Yep.
And as he's shooting, Thane really does the shooting. But it all gets pinned on. They need a patsy. If it had fallen on Thane, they would have thrown him under the bus too. But if they can blame it on a Palestinian, perfect. Yeah. And they did. They're like, he was motivated by this. And they had this ridiculous notebook where he's stuttering in the notebook and writing, kill Robert Kennedy, must kill Robert Kennedy, all over 100 times, writing his name and stuff, which was the Hollywood version of what a crazy person was like. You know, it's like The Shining. They just type kill. Please, Frank, Ramos, pay to the 5, the order, kill Robert Kennedy, scribbling all over pages and pages and pages, so that if he talks, well, clearly this guy's just nuts. And the picture they put him in the paper, his eyes are all like, go look up Sirhan paper. They're like, this guy's crazy, schizophrenic, multi-personality, whatever they got to say. Don't listen to him. And then all his counsel, his head lawyer had to drop off the case because in another case, he was tampering with the jury testimony. Like, he gets removed for getting grand jury testimony leaked because so they can intimidate the witnesses. But then Parsons steps in, so his co-counsel was even worse. It's a guy that Kennedy was investigating himself. And who paid for all this stuff? Well, that all goes back, and it's the same mobsters that end up in the Nixon administration. They ran what was called Westgate, California, and which Alessio was a shareholder and a director of. They're the ones that hired Caesar. He goes and retires in the Philippines. It's like, one day, like if you want, we can get here and I can bring in all the documents and photographs of the bullet holes and all the stuff and just walk through RFK. I'm fine with that. But it really needs to be on a super large show. Like, look, this one you can explain in a day. JFK is a bit more complex, like a big chunk of it. There's 2 films I did it. One's Numec on like the why, and one is called Decades of Deception on the kind of the how and who. I really ought to combine those and just make a Kennedy film, because most of Numec's on the theft of uranium and most of Decades of Deception is just on, is like a timeline of CIA operations, but that chunk in the 60s is on the Kennedys. But like I said in the very beginning, I just don't think it would matter, because Israel's committing genocide right now. And they've had umpteen assassinations. They assassinated, like last year, they were assassinating Hamas leaders and negotiators. There's a little bit of suspicion on the Iranian president's helicopter that just fell out of the sky. I think we should relook at that. I can't prove that was Israel, but damn,
right.
If anybody, if that was sabotage, I mean, they might have worked with Azerbaijanis or something, but who would want to get rid of him? And yeah, I mean, routinely they killed the heads of Hezbollah. Like, anybody's going to negotiate, they just murder them. And then you have the pager attack, indiscriminate killing. This is what they do.
Yep.
They assassinate, which opens the door for assassination on themselves. I don't know if they realize that. If somebody pops Netanyahu, I don't know if it would work. It'd have to be a silver bullet, I think. I don't think regular bullets kill those things.
I'm sure there's no shortage of people who would be up for the job, but
you just get replaced. They're all the same. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, like there's no other super hardcore Zionist lunatic.
Oh, plenty.
Oh yeah, like they're like, who would you like? Do you want? I don't want Benny. I don't want Gantz. I don't want Kabir. They're all like that.
So you final verdict, final statement on the JFK files, Ryan. What do people need to take away from this experience?
I think they're useful in the fact that it reinvigorates public interest in something that had kind of died off. But as specifically, these files are not going to give you the answer, because they're not going to do that. Yeah, they're not going to ever turn on Israel. But I'm telling you, it was Israel. I think we kind of made a pretty good case given the amount of time. And yeah, I'll walk through it one day and we'll just talk about, okay, here's the beginning. It's just JFK. I kind of have COVID fatigue. You know, you just got sick of talking about it. It's like, I can't talk. I don't want to hear anything about COVID. It's making me physically ill. That is me on both JFK and September 11th. I will do it, but I hate it. I just, I was listening to the Mario Space and they're just, oh, you know, Oswald went to Mexico. And I'm like, oh my God, just go away.
Anything else?
I can't deal with it. Like,
anything but that. I know what you mean. There's some stuff I can't touch because I've just oversaturated.
I got saturated on Syria too after a while. It was like, if I have to explain the white helmet thing again, or the gas attack, or, you know what I mean? That's me. I got a kind of visceral reaction to I'm only talking about this with you. I usually don't do Kennedy interviews. People are like, why don't you ever talk about Kennedy? I just can't. I can't do it. No more. I got so much shit for it. My life get turned upside down for tackling these subjects. That's a real thing. I lost a lot of money. I put in a lot of 16-hour days working 2 jobs in Japan and stuff. I have health issues from it, from being forced out, you know, and canceled on everything. Affected me. Yep. And that hurt my family too. And I'm like, we're not going through that. I'm not going to walk through Kennedy and deal with the backlash unless it's on a show that's sizable enough that they can't cancel it.
Yep.
Like once it's out, and I can just and never have to ever explain it again. I'm like, just go watch it on that show. I'm done. That's where I'm at. But the final thing is, yeah, these files were worth it in the fact that it invigorated public interest, and that's healthy. It's just I'm already seeing today, because I'm on opposite time zones. You know, I get up, I look at X. Oh God, it's already gaining Alex Jones. You know, it's becoming a tar baby. I knew they were going to do that, and it's like the dumbest is the loudest, and that's what permeates like Luna said, well, I think there were two shooters and it's not a magic bullet. Okay.
Yeah. I think there are two shooters, she said, like it's her theory.
Oh yeah. You didn't like that is, I think they think that it's a talking point because you saw it on YouTube or you watched the JFK movie. I guarantee if I asked her who McNamara was, she wouldn't know. If I said, can you just name Kennedy's cabinet? None of these people could do it because they never really looked at it. And these people like arguing about these new files. I'm like, how can you pretend to be interested in whatever the new files are when you didn't look at the old files? And it's clear you didn't look at the old files because you don't know which ones are which. And it's fine if you didn't, but then don't pretend that you did. Just be like, yeah, I didn't look at them. There's too many of them or whatever. But just tell the truth. And they're not. Everyone's acting like they're a Kennedy expert. Everyone's acting like they always knew crap they learned yesterday. Everyone's recycling that we got Jewish backers paper. Like, okay, that's good, but that's been out for a very long time. Yeah, Conley too. Johnson wanted Senator Yarborough he wanted him in the vehicle with Kennedy. He's like, no, you're riding with him. I'm riding with the governor. If he could have switched that around, they would have shot him too, 100%.
Yeah, I grew up around DC, and I remember when I got a little older, I was like in junior high, and I think it was my mom or my dad was talking about when they were at a function, political function, and Connolly was with a dodgy hand. They had remembered that they had a sort of injured right hand or something like that.
Hitting the wrist, yeah.
Yeah, so that was like a topic of conversation in the early 80s, the dinner table talk in back in the day.
I think Maurice Bishop wrote a book in the 80s. It was kind of like a if I did it thing. And some of these people kind of confess in fiction. Like, well, I would say this is all made up, but OJ did that. He had an If I Did It book. I didn't, but if I did, shameless. Yeah.
Well, I think if people want to know the why of what's behind this, I think
Which is the most important thing. Yep, go watch that. It's free.
Do Numec on Rumble. Encourage people to go there. Go to Rumble. Type in Numec Ryan Dawson. You'll come up to this copy of Numec. That's I think a great starting point.
And I'm going to screen Numec right after this interview with Arabic subtitles. So if you have some Arabic friends,
awesome.
We're going to screen that whole film, and I'll do a little probably extra at the very end.
You're going to do that on X?
It'll be on Rumble and X.
Rumble
and
X.
And BitChute. Yep.
So I'll put Ryan's, just go to everybody you want to follow Ryan Dawson there, Rye Liberty at X. And we've got a link to the anti-neocon report on our show page, as well as links under the descriptions of these videos. So follow Ryan and support his work. So yeah, before we go, Ryan, what's the best way that people can support what you do?
Right there on X, ryandawson.org is my Substack. That's the one that actually makes money. So that's I'm covering everything. It's not just Kennedy's, it's all these Middle East conflicts and things, but ryandawson.org. And we have a shop, antineocon.com. But you can follow me on Rumble and X. That's what I have social media wise.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you go to X, links in bio. There you go. ANC.
It's all there. Yeah.
I've got a Telegram. It's interesting. I'm not in charge of what everyone says on there, but that's, it's pretty good.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways you can support Ryan. He's also got buy me a coffee links there as well. Some people are supporting you that way.
Yep.
So
that was down this morning though, for some reason. Knock on wood. All these things are fragile. That's the problem. Like I can't even really actively promote stuff because I'm like, well, if I do that too much, they'll get rid of it.
Yeah, I know.
But
what you mean.
Substack is solid, and I have, you can subscribe on X too, but I would tell you the Substack is better. Gives you, I put way more content there because X doesn't let you put up MP3s, for example. So it's better than nothing. But if you're going to subscribe somewhere, then choose the Substack or ANC Report because they get the best things.
Yep. Okay, Ryan. Well, look, I appreciate you and your time. It's obviously it means a lot to you, this topic. You've done a lot of work on it, and you produced some fantastic films as well.
Thank you.
And we will feature your Numec at 21st Century Wire on Sunday.
Oh,
Sunday
that's
screening.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We'll be pushing that out on Sunday to all of our audience.
We that comes with a map. Like that green map on my door there's I think the first comment or in the description on Rumble where you can get that map. And that's like, look, the film is free. But if you're like like that was a good film and you want to kick over some shekels, you can get a map.
Yeah.
And the map does help. It's a lot of names and a lot of information. And that visual, my mic's kind of in the way, but that green one back there
on the back, on the door. Yeah. Yeah.
On the door gives you all the movers and shakers.
Yep. So that's something you can get a hold of, folks. And it's there's a lot of information there. It's good data to have. Helps to connect a lot of important dots.
It bleeds right into the white one above it too, with Epstein. That's why I have them positioned that way.
That's the Epstein.
That's actually
top.
One giant map. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you can get both of those from ANC or from your store, right?
Yep. Antineocon.com. You can get them there.
Yep. And I'm waiting for the big soft pillow or the duvet cover of the Epstein client list to go to bed.
I'm not putting Epstein clients on bed sheets or pillows because it's weird to have pedophiles under your head.
Yeah, that's not good. Yeah.
I was like, oh, we could do. Oh, wait, I can't do that. So it's a
teddy bear with the t-shirt. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, it's just not that topic. Exactly. Yeah.
That's not gonna happen. Right.
I have a hoodie and a t-shirt, but I feel like here's a conversation starter. Go walk into a pub or something with a map on the front, client list on the back. I feel like, where'd you get that? Let them know. And yeah, I have got hours and hours and hours of videos explaining those maps.
Be a good icebreaker down in the bars in West Palm Beach and
but if you go into a protest, wear those.
Oh
yeah, just walk around Mar-a-Lago with the Epstein hoodie.
I think that'd be fun. Ryan Dawson, thank you again, and hope you have a great day. And again, check out Ryan. Go right now. If you're Arabic speaker, you'll have the Numec Arabic version coming out now.
It's in English, but it's subtitled in Arabic, so you can watch. If you've never seen it, you can watch it live, or you can watch it later. But this one is shareable with Arabic titles. So if you have someone that sort of speaks English, but would like, it is, very complicated topic, and they're an Arabic speaker, we have it in Arabic.
Yep. Right. Thank you very much, Ryan. Ryan Dawson.
Thank you, Patrick.
Anti-Neocon Report. That's all we have time for today, folks. So this has been a special midweek. We normally only do a very short episode midweek, but this is an understatement. The amount of material you have to cover just to scratch the surface of this is immense. So I think we've done quite a bit. Anyway, if you want to go deeper in this, you want to go, and Ryan's got plenty of content and material on all this and many, many other subjects as well. Plus the commentary that's going to come out, folks. There's just so much stuff that continues to come out. There'll be commentary as it's drips and drabs as it comes out. So do tune into Ryan Dawson to get some perspective on what you're actually seeing, because there's a lot of static and a lot of noise. So you want to sort of get around that if you can. And Ryan's one of the best people for some of these complex topics. So listen, that's all we got time for today. Really appreciate you guys. Again, if you missed any of the live broadcast, you can catch this on Rumble. It'll replay on X and YouTube and at 21stcenturywire.com, and check out our archive as well of Sunday Wire and Midweek Wire programs. And we've got one new program we're going to launch, I hope this week, but we'll see. So that'll be some of our new programming. Appreciate your support from people who've donated during the winter fundraising drive. People subscribe.